This is a reading of Grimmberries for Samhain, the Feast of Halloween. Written and narrated by Mark Steven Nordlund. Copyright 2025, Mark Steven Nordlund. All rights reserved. A Boohouse Books book. BoohouseBooks.com. The old chant goes, "Come and sup for every turn. Let the old ones join our urn. Another grind against the churn. Watch the flames of Samhain burn." These words are long since forgotten. Their message has died with the passing of time and the failure of the generations. However, the rules that accompany them are still very, very much alive. Beginning as long ago as 5,000 years, the festival of Samhain was celebrated by the ancient Celts between October 31st and the first day of November. This short 2-day window represented the end of the harvest season and the time in which the boundary between the living and the dead decayed to its weakest point before the beginning of the new year. Large bonfires were lit, offerings of food were presented to deceased ancestors, and the living adorned themselves in animal skins to ward off corrupted evils. Over centuries, the pagan rituals of Samhain fell to tradition and devolved from divine purpose to inconsequential frivolity. Samhain became the eve of All Saints' Day, and eventually Halloween, as the world found new religion by the end of the 10th century. Pagan traditions remained the same, although their meanings became rebranded and repurposed to fit the changing years. After World War II in the United States, Halloween fully commercialized after the wartime ban on sugar was lifted and suburban growth cultivated. Offerings for the dead became trick-or-treating, and animal skins transitioned to store-bought costumes for children. Today, the holiday has reached all new lows of ludicrosity, and in many countries, holds as robust a commercial income stream as Christmas. Throughout the entire month of October and growing, many participants rhapsodize death, darkness, and gore, as millions justify the worship of deviltry, embracing their own diabolical natures without the fear of prosecution. The days of Samhain remain lost, misconstrued, and abandoned by arrogance. Only wickedness can thrive in a modern world where villainy is celebrated, the dead fall to starvation, and disencumbered evils treading on the living earth need no place to hide. The high-pitched beep of a rolling forklift echoed against the towering walls of the massive hardware store. A wrapped pallet was positioned into place and lowered to the floor. A young lethargic employee ran his blade through the stretched film, freeing the new shipment of Halloween lawn inflatables. He took each box from the pine pallet and dropped them to his feet, kicking them across the shiny concrete and against a wide green display rack. The forklift pulled its tongs free and continued to scream as it departed for the rear stockroom and left the sales floor. A tap came at the boy's shoulder as he folded his blade and whirled around. "Happy Halloween!" An overenthusiastic man in an appalling gray and orange sweater greeted him beside an equally avid wife in an equally hideous top. The words, "This is my ugly Halloween sweater," were woven into both, with thick crimson yarn. The wife repeated, "Happy Halloween!" Beams of unwanted cheerfulness emitted from her wide stare and blinding teeth. Behind the couple, a flat rolling cart held at least 24 seasonal lawn inflatables, yard props, and over 2,000 feet of orange and purple lights. The boy felt a suspecting chill run up his spine. He had heard stories about customers like this, Halloween freaks seeking exclusive favors in exchange for harassment and boisterous persistence. Interactions with them always took a turn for the worst. The date was currently September 7th, but in order to retain his minimum wage job, the customer had to be right. He mumbled without dispute, "Happy Halloween." I'm Dave, and this is my beautiful wife, Betty, the man introduced. He gestured to his wife. She waved her hand eagerly. Hi, she squeaked. The kid half-heartedly returned the wave. Hi. And you are? Dave slapped his hand against the boy's plastic name tag. Jason, he shouted. Jason, my wife and I are the most devout Halloweeners you'll ever meet. You've heard of us? Halloweeners? Jason asked. He had never heard the term before, but was sure he was mere seconds away from learning all about it. Immediately, he regretted his inquiry. Dave blushed with a smile as his wife jumped excitedly. It's a term we're trying to get going online, he said proudly. Soon it'll be a household name. We hope. Currently, our social media has over 10,000 dedicated Halloweeners. We take the holiday very seriously. It's a lot more than a holiday for us, more of a way of life that lasts all year. Betty nodded dramatically. We think Christmas is overstuffed and offers no real substance or morality when applied to life. God is overrated, he whispered covertly. And come on, has anyone ever really met him? He turned to his wife. You ever met the big guy? Betty's brow rose as she shrugged and shook her head. Nope, she answered. There it is, Dave confirmed. The couple kissed. It's time for the Halloweeners. Halloweeners all the way. Dave's face narrowed with a sense of seriousness as he captiously examined the stock boy. Jason, are you a Halloweener? He asked. They stared him down like a pair of Quakers during a witch hunt. Well, he stuttered. He searched for any way to relate, even just to get through the interrogation. I did take my little brother trick-or-treating last year. My mom made me do it because she found pot under my bed, he blurted out. Fear set in as he wondered if drug possession was a detail better left omitted when speaking with a customer. Dave grinned as he raised a hand and a request for a high five into the air. Attaboy, he cheered. Jason returned the gesture with a soft slap. He chuckled nervously. No negative judgment seemed to follow the confession. Jason, my wife and I are wondering if you could help us out, Dave petitioned as he gestured to the pallet. The kid returned his arms to his sides and stood awkwardly. How can I help you today? He asked. Here it came, Jason thought. The favors. We are on the hunt for... Dave began. He leaned backward as his wife lifted her phone into view. Betty pointed to a list of items on her screen. We are looking for ghost in pumpkin with witch hat, Frankenstein teddy bear, and skeleton playing banjo on gravestone, he listed. Jason turned to the pallet and began searching through the large black boxes. Okay, here's banjo. He handed them a large box. Fantastic, Dave erupted. He handed over a second box. Ghost witch. Outstanding, Dave chimed. Jason searched for the final request. He peeled back the plastic wrap, exposing the shipment of yard decor. Slowly, he dismantled the stack. After sifting through the inventory, he spotted the bear and presented it to them. Frankenstein teddy bear, he said. The package depicted the image of a green statuesque monster holding a small zombified bear. Dave's expression narrowed with disappointment. No, we have that one already. That's Frankenstein with teddy bear. We're looking for Frankenstein teddy bear. A teddy bear that is Frankenstein. Oh, Jason groaned. He placed the box on the floor and continued to search. If it's not on the pallet, we have a lot more in back, he muttered. Ooh, Betty gasped. Oh my God, it's David, look. Raw elation shined from her blue eyes as she pointed to a box on the pallet. Dave's euphoria was equal to his wife's, but expressed with more reservation. He bent down and retrieved an item from the pallet. Jason, you've been holding out on us, he accused with felicity. The kid stood and eyed the item with mild perplexity. This is Rooster with Pumpkin Scarecrow. Yeah, looks like it, Jason agreed. This lawn decoration isn't supposed to be out this year, Dave stated. Betty was overwhelmed with emotion. She pocketed her phone and quickly began fanning her eyes as they moistened with joy. Rooster with Pumpkin Scarecrow is part of the Farm Friends collection that was supposed to but did not release in 2021 because of manpower complications during COVID, Dave said. He stared at Jason with astonishment. I think I'm going to cry, Betty choked. I never thought I'd see it in person. Jason scratched his head. Oh, yeah, he remembered. Management told us something about getting backstock this year, he said. There's more in back, I think. Dave looked at his wife. Betty folded her fingers in front of her nose as tears streamed down her cheeks. He looked back at the boy. Jason, are you telling me that pig with candy corn, horse Grim Reaper, and cow flying over moon on broomstick could be in this building? Dave and Betty stared at Jason with a level of desperation commonly witnessed just before a murder verdict. He squeaked. Yeah, I think I saw those. Dave became weak in the knees as Betty threw her hands into the air in unbridled praise. She jumped on her toes again as the couple hugged, whispering words of endearment and celebration to one another. There's others too, like one with a hatching chicken, a haunted barn, and a raccoon dressed like Dracula. The stunned surprise returned to their faces. But there's a lot more in the collection, he said. He eyed their cart full of boxes. I don't know what kind of car you guys drove, but you need a truck to move them all. How many farm friends do you have back there? Dave asked intensely. Jason thought for a second. 14, I think. Do you rent trailers? Dave inquired. Yeah, he replied. Dave took a close step to the young employee and spoke candidly. Jason, if you hook up that trailer and get every lawn spook you have in stock loaded up, there's 2 tips in it for you. Okay, Jason gasped. The first is this. Dave reached into his pocket and handed the stock boy a folded up $50 bill. The kid took it into his hand with wild disbelief. And the second tip is this, Dave growled. He brought his lips close to Jason's ear and whispered. Next time, hide the pot in your mom's bedroom closet. She'll never find it in 10 years, and if your dad finds it, the argument that follows won't involve you. The man slapped the boy on the shoulder, winked surreptitiously, and departed with his wife. Jason chuckled nervously as he stared at the cash in his hand. Black SUV's already parked out front, Dave called out. License plate is Wieners. The boy's lips twisted into a dumbfounded simper. His interaction with the Halloween freaks had taken an unexpected, yet profitable, and opportunistic turn for the best. Dave and Betty drove through an unfamiliar town located about 60 miles from their new home in Bradbury Ash. The 8-foot trailer and rear cabin was stocked high, with enough Halloween supplies to open a store of their own. The bumper and rear window of their jet black Suburban was covered in a clutter of occult-themed stickers, horror film decals, and a looping orange ribbon that read, Support Halloween. Sunday traffic crowded the streets as gray daylight showed through a thick layer of dimming clouds. Betty fussed with her long blonde hair and showed obvious signs of distress. Her husband fought through the never-ending stream of oncoming vehicles, attempting to make a wide left turn. What are you so nervous about, hon? He asked. She folded her fingers and slapped her hands onto her lap. What if they don't have it? She squawked. I'll just die if they don't have it. They'll have it, he assured her. I called ahead last week and again yesterday. Patrick is holding it for us, and I even Venmo'd him $100 to put a guarantee on it. It'll be there. She tapped on her teeth with manicured fingernails. Well, couldn't they have shipped it to a location closer to home? She asked. We must have passed 6 stores on the way here. Dave huffed through his nose. Sweetie, the book has been in Germany for the last 1,000 years. It's only been in the U.S. for a handful of months, and that was Cincinnati. I don't think that it's completely unreasonable that we drive an hour out of our way to pick it up. She nodded, subserviently agreeing with him. Anyway, moving it again would just put more hands and more interest on it, especially during this time of the year, he added. Ooh, Betty puffed, distracted by another thought. She slapped her hands together. I'm going to look at their baking recipe books. I might find something new. Or even better, something old. That's the spirit, he encouraged. Also, start thinking about what theme we're doing this year for Trick or Treat. We've only got 54 days to prep before the big event. His wife died with unease. I know, she moaned. You must think I'm a terrible wife. Last year, I had everything planned out by July. She rested her forehead on her fingers. But with the stress of the move and setting up the new place, I've barely had time to decide how we're decorating the inside of the house, what we're doing for costumes, and what wine to pour when we're watching our show after Halloween midnight. Everything forms into a big, illegible ball of tasks in my brain, and you know stress makes me forgetful. Nonsense, he eased. We've got plenty of time. The move put us both off our game. If it makes you feel any better, I didn't update my Facebook status to feeling Halloweeny until just last month. Betty dropped her jaw and stared at him in horror. I don't even know you anymore, she gasped. I know, he concurred with shame. The move's been hell on us both. They pulled into a small strip mall parking lot. The black Suburban pulled into two empty spaces, leaving room for the trailer. David geared the truck into park and rested his elbow on the wheel. Don't go nuts in here now. I don't know what this little venture is going to cost us, so I don't need you spending our entire Halloween budget on books, he warned. You're the one tossing cash around with your generous tips, she argued. It's not about generosity, he said. It's about giving credit where credit is due. The world is inherently ignorant. It's an inconvenience I gladly pay to avoid. Buy and Sell Books was wedged between an office supply store and a Mexican supermarket. The couple exited the SUV and approached the bookstore. The closer they drew to the shop, the more panicked Betty became. Dave noticed her discomfort and threw a sympathizing arm around her. Long, calming breath, sweetie. Remember the exercises we practiced? 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. And think about how amazing Halloween is going to be. That'll get you through it. They'll have the book, I promise. Inside, the atmosphere smelled of aged parchment and old world must. The air was thick with earthy elements. If the day had been sunny, swirling clouds of dust would have been visible against the tall windows. Betty stood before a seasonal display of books, presenting titles by Anne Rice, Edgar Allan Poe, and R.L. Stine. Paper skeletons reminiscent of a kindergarten classroom decorated the display with dangling rubber bats. She took a long, devouring breath and grinned with serenity. Okay, I'm calm now, she whispered. I'm in my happy place. Passing the front registers, Dave traveled to the far back of the shop. He stood before a long wooden counter below the words, Buy and sell in-store or online. Not a soul could be seen behind the counter. However, a service bell was provided for just such a circumstance. He tapped the bell and waited for service, as Betty joined his side. After a long moment, an elderly woman approached, holding a classical music guide and a Hostess Twinkie. Her pale complexion matched the tedium of her motif print top and corduroy skirt. She set the book on the counter, opened it to an arbitrary section, and took a bite of her treat. She chewed as she openly ignored the couple before her. Hi, Dave began. Patrick is holding a book for us? We arranged pickup today. My name is David Wallace. He said he'd be here until noon, he said. The woman made no eye contact. She continued to eat as she lifted a finger, prompting the couple to wait until she either finished reading or finished chewing. A gold cross dangled from her wrist. With a glint of aggravation, Dave waited patiently, drumming his fingers against the counter. After 2 more bites and a drawn-out minute, the clerk slapped the crumbs from her fingers and closed the book. She lifted her eyes. Break time finally over? Dave asked sarcastically. She swallowed her remaining cake and folded her hands slowly on the wooden surface. How can I help you? She asked flatly. Dave repeated. Patrick is holding a book for us. We're picking it up today. What is the title of the book? She asked. Dave knocked at the counter with his knuckle and struggled to recall the exact title. Compenditures of Abraxi something. It's an old Celtic spell book. Creepy ass old-looking witch book. Betty spoke over him, attempting to correct him as he answered. Her words were inaudible under the volume of his voice. Dave leaned back. Sorry, what was that, hon? His wife spoke again. Compendium of the Abermati and Mage, Volume 6. The title printed inside is in Old Gaelic, but it translates to the Compendium of the Abermati and Mage, Volume 6. Dave tilted his head towards his wife. What she said. Compendium Mage book. Big one. He held his hands out in front of him, spacing them about a foot apart. It's about yay big, looks old and haunted. Probably actually haunted, come to think of it. It looks like something your grandmother's grandmother's grandmother would own if she had been burned at the stake for turning children into small rodents for sustenance, he explained. The woman just stared at them. Her expression had twisted into a whole new level of adversity during the course of the book's description. Disinterest became raw repugnance. Seconds passed. Do you know that book? Dave asked. The clerk removed her thin glasses and thumbed at her nose. She petulantly observed the foolish whimsicality of the couple's matching sweaters. She looked directly into David's eyes and addressed him coldly. Yes, I know that book, she hissed. Tensions rose. And the likes of you, nor anyone else, should ever lay a hand on it. Dave's face flattened with incredulity. And if I had my way, it would be burned in the same furnace that awaits the both of you and anyone else celebrating that wretched holiday. Betty gasped with offense. You unbelievable bitch! Dave raised his palm and calmed his wife as her breathing went into spasms. Okay, no need for insults. We're all adults here. Do your breathing like we talked about and think about Halloween. He turned back to the woman. Look, miss, he prompted her. I'm not giving my name to you, she growled. He relinquished the request. Look, miss, we're just here to pick up our book, pay our tab, and be on our way, he said calmly. Please leave, she scratched. That book is the devil's work. Dave became pettish. Which devil? Because there's about 6 of them in the Old Testament, not to mention unclean spirits, lying spirits, the Legion, and Abaddon. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same guy here, he snarked. I'd hate for this altercation to continue based on misunderstanding alone. Formidable rage flushed in the clerk's thin, bony cheeks. He leaned in closer to her. His condescension sharpened. If the nature of my book scares you because of what they taught you in Sunday school in the late 1940s, that's not on us. Personally, I'm afraid of any books about rabid wild animals. Cujo? Absolutely terrifying, couldn't finish it. But I can see now by your fire and brimstone visage that our conversation has reached an impasse. So if you could just get my boy Patrick, I'm sure he could be of better service to us. You have no idea the powers you are tinkering with, she barked. Her neck began to twitch and her hands trembled. Dave closed his eyes and nodded. I'm pretty sure that we do. In fact, I'm so unafraid of that book, I'll read it in the can with my pants down and tinker with its powers to conjure me more toilet paper. And I'll think of you when I do it. Blasphemy, the woman cried. Blasphemy is the act or offense of speaking sacrilegiously about God or sacred things, but nice try. I only addressed the book you've failed to retrieve, Dave countered. From a back room, a tall, wide man holding a large flat box against his belly emerged. He stood beside the flustered old woman as she writhed with outrage. Agatha, he said, why don't you see to the out of Prince and Home and Garden? I'll take care of these folks, he requested casually. Agatha, Dave repeated with a grin. Agatha, Betty murmured through her teeth. Now we have your name, Agatha. What now? Dave teased. You will both answer for your sins. You can bet on that, she grunted. The Lord brings judgment to us all. She turned on her heel and stepped away from the counter. Dave called out to her as she stormed away. To our credit, you are working on a Sunday, are you not? That's a big no-no in your book. You going to get judged for that? Hopefully patriotism makes up for disobedience. Bye-bye, Betty shouted with a taunt. No words were returned. Agatha turned a corner and disappeared. Sorry about that, the man said kindly. Agatha's been on edge a bit lately since your book arrived. She says it's the devil's book or some religious hoo-ha. The Twinkies seemed to take her edge off. He rested the box on the counter. Ha! Betty cried with a laugh. Well, hopefully it is the Devil's Book. That's what we're paying for. Dave beamed. My wife's been on edge ever since we found out it entered the market. We've been looking for it for some time. You're Patrick, I presume? Patrick extended his large hand and shook Dave's. I am. Let me get you all sorted out. After shaking Betty's tiny paw, he positioned the box directly under Dave's nose and retrieved a blade. Dave looked upon the box. Is that it? He asked. Yep, the man croaked. Straight from Ohio and Munich, Germany. Betty leapt with excitement and tapped her teeth. Before that, it was in Geneva, Switzerland. It's been kicked around the States for a year or so. Big collector's item, but it never seems to stay in the same place for long. That's promising, Dave remarked. In so many words, he half agreed. How it ended up at a buy and sell books is beyond me. Idiot clerk in Vermont paid the seller $20 for it. Does that mean I'm paying $40? Dave joked. Patrick laughed. Nope. Misappraisal and acquisition cost does not affect resale price. Store policy. Dave moaned. I figured as much. The man opened the box and swung the top open. He unfolded several layers of acid-free tissue paper and exposed the book's magnificent cover. Countless centuries of wear and the punishment of history's wars, plagues, and atrocities aged the codex to a gnarled perfection. The birch covering was wrapped delicately in ruby-dyed leather and reinforced with worn bronze hinges. No inscriptions were present on the front cover, nor the book's ribbed and weather-beaten spine. Dave took a short second to observe it. He raised his nose to the clerk. Looks good to me, he said. But honestly, I'd say the same thing to an unmarked leather-bound print of Sorcery for Dummies. He turned to his wife. Sweetheart, this is your department. You're the bookworm. Is this your book? He asked as he stepped aside. Betty approached and stood before the codex. She pulled out an eccentric pair of jack-o'-lantern print reading glasses and placed them on her face. After fastening back her hair with a purple scrunchie, she carelessly threw open the book's cover and sifted through its pages. With apparent disinterest in the text's preservation or condition, Betty flipped through the book in chunks, searching diligently. Towards the back of the codex, Betty stopped. She eyed a small yellow stain smeared across handwritten Gaelic print. She rubbed at the stain with her thumb. She smiled, bounced on her toes, and slapped her hands together. This is it, she chirped. Her husband looked up at Patrick and shrugged. The lady says it's legit. What do I owe you? He asked. The clerk carefully closed the book, replaced the tissue, and sealed the box. For the Compendium of the Abermati and Mage Volume 6, you're looking at about 4 big ones, 4,000, he said. Dave winced and whistled through his teeth at the figure. But, Patrick lowered his voice, since you dealt with me so graciously with your manners, your patience, and your wallet, the best I can do as a buy and sell employee is give you our associate discount. That's 10%. He slid over a plastic calculator and tapped the buttons, bringing you down to $3,600. Well, Dave stammered, I very much appreciate your graciousness in return, but even $3,600 threatens to break the bank. He stewed for a moment, then glanced at Betty. She folded her fingers in front of her face and begged with her eyes. Dave sighed and looked back at Patrick. I'd be neglecting my self-indulgent need to haggle if I didn't ask if there were any other ways we could lower the price. He haggled. Fair enough, the clerk said. I'll knock off $20 if you buy a book today. Dave's expression warmed with satisfaction. He turned to his wife. Sweetheart, you said you were in the market for some baking books? He asked. Betty squealed with glee as she jogged away and headed for the culinary section of the bookstore. Her slapping steps faded into silence. Dave released a long breath as he pulled out his wallet. Happy wife, happy life, right? He said to the clerk. Patrick shook his head and giggled. Ain't that the truth? He laughed. He peeled a large round sticker from a roll and slapped it onto the box encasing the codex. The shiny, Halloweeny font read, "Scare you again soon." The day's errand run came to a close as the Suburban cruised home, trailer in tow. Dave gripped the wheel as Betty cheerfully studied the compendium. She used her phone's translation app to convert each inscription from Old Gaelic to modern English. The box and tissue paper lay discarded on the rear seat as she reviewed each page, snapped a picture, and read with a childlike wonder. A second book entitled The Vintage Baker rested on the high dashboard. Good read? Dave asked. This is remarkable, David, she gushed. This volume actually lists real spells, conjuring practices, and summons. It's full of them. And the recipes aren't that complex. Most of these ingredients can be bought at Whole Foods or the farmer's market downtown. Dave eyed her suspiciously. I don't have to worry about you turning into one of those teen hot topic witches, do I? He asked in jest. Betty dropped her phone to the book. She flashed her husband a look of ire. Her Halloween reading glasses were still perched on her nose. You know I'm not that naive, she groaned. Okay, he replied cautiously. But if I see a new nose piercing or Harry Potter tattoo, I'm going to start to judge. His wife ignored him, her eyes back on the codex. This recipe, for example, she said. She tilted the book in his direction. Meadowsweet, yarrow, hazelnut, and wild garlic with Grimmberry mash and hare. Dave made a 1-second attempt to understand a single word she had just said before shaking off the confusion. All I got from that was garlic, because garlic is on pizza, he said. Betty smiled wildly and presented the screen of her phone as he drove. And look at that, she squeaked. Google searches for each ingredient and tells you where you can buy them locally. She went through the shopping list. With the exception of a few, she groaned. Exception? He asked. Grimmberries, she replied. She looked over the book and searched for the ingredient online, yielding no results. What the hell is a Grimmberry? She irked. Search under Frankenberry and Booberry. Sounds like a new addition to the General Mills lineup, he jested. Betty became flustered. Baby, would you just please cut the dad joke sarcasm? You know this is my thing. Books are my thing. Films are your thing. I don't roast you on your horror movie trivia shit and which mask Freddy wore in what movie in what decade, she barked. Okay, he backed off. Do your thing and I'll do mine. And it was Jason. Not Freddy, by the way. Jason wore the mask. And Michael. Exactly, she concluded. Just be careful, he feigned caution. You may have no idea of the powers you are tinkering with. He mocked the woman at the bookstore. Oh, good gods, that bitch. Could you even believe her gall? Where does she get off talking to us like that? Betty bawled. The benightedness of the misled, Dave cited. Poor Agatha. Burn everything you disagree with, she satired. I can't believe with all the advancements in human society, we still have psychological witch trials. Although I was impressed with your Old Testament knowledge. You'd be surprised how much of the horror film industry relies heavily on Catholic influence, he said. Useful information, though. Helps me deal with freaks like Agatha. They hate it when heathens know more about their book than they do. Drives them crazy. There's no finer wine than watching the ignorant cry by the feast of their own famine, he quoted. Righteous bitch, Betty murmured. Her husband reached over and patted her on the knee. Don't sink to her level, hon. Her negativity only affects you as much as you let it, he said. She's going through some tough trials herself if she's spitting curses like that to complete strangers. I damn hope so, she spat bitterly. Slapping the codex closed, Betty took the vintage baking book from the dashboard and placed both books in a neat stack on her lap. Her grin became as wide as the promises of a Cheshire cat. She beamed with mirth as she sat in her seat, holding both books tightly together. Her husband noticed the change in her demeanor. "What?" he asked. She showed her teeth and shrugged innocently. "What's that look all about?" Dave giggled. Betty walked her fingers across the cover of the baking book, teasing his intrigue. "I may know what we're doing for trick or treat this year," she sang. "Oh?" he inquired. "Well, do tell. What are you concocting?" She lifted both books from her lap and presented them together with extended, eager arms. Dave figured it out immediately. "Oh," he howled. "I like it. I like it a lot." A moment passed as Dave's face softened with skepticism. "You sure it'll work?" he asked. "Of course it'll work. I'll make it work," she said confidently. "And you know I don't go for an idea without testing it first. As always, everything that comes out of my kitchen will taste amazing." Betty held the books against her chest. Her anxiety from earlier in the day eased as the couple sat side by side, shining with enthusiasm, ambition, and bliss. "I'll tell you what," Dave chimed. "This idea of yours may be a little belated, but I'd be lying if I said this wasn't the best theme you've come up with in years." Betty cooed. "Thank you, baby." They leaned in and kissed. They both reached for their Starbucks pumpkin cream cold brews in the center console, lifted them high, and tapped their edges together in a toast. "To the Halloweeners," Dave cheered. "To the Halloweeners," his wife returned. September chilled to an ebbing brisk as autumn winds brought October tides. The warming colors of nature's course were welcomed with hot beverages, harvest themes, and pungent scents. Every creature adorned pattern wool and frosted breath as the end of year neared and spirits came to life. The Wallace household was the first to embrace the fall, and with the furthermost enthusiasm. Dave worked vigorously through the month of September, transforming the home to a robust display of Halloween charm. 37 inflatables decorated the lawn, as an oversized skeleton towered over the walkway. The purple and orange lights covering the house reached Griswold levels of over-embellishment, as cotton ghosts, polystyrene jack-o'-lanterns, and pun-laden headstones haunted every square foot of the property. Only the driveway and garage door were left untouched by the ghoulish invasion, reserved and ready for the day itself. Night fell as Betty busied herself in the large kitchen. The interior of the home matched the lawn. Autumn wreaths and veiling cobwebs covered ivory walls and a library of countless inset bookshelves. She stood before a variable cornucopia of ingredients, sprawled across the kitchen's island in a disorienting mess. Pie plates, cake pans, and cookie trays were stacked along with mixing bowls, whisks, and wooden spoons. A pair of KitchenAid mixers stood adjacent to one another, one violet and one orange. Not a single tool or supply was left to compromise. At the center of it all, the compendium of the Abermati and Mage Volume 6, laid open to a selected section and soiled with dry splashes of baking flour. A long-stemmed dandelion was placed neatly beside it. Dave descended the curving staircase wearing Ghostface print pajamas. He entered the kitchen, eyes on his phone. "During all of your journeys in the literature world," he began. He looked up from his device to see Betty, covered in white splotches and a black and orange polka dot apron. "Did Bram Stoker ever explain what the pendant around Dracula's neck was supposed to signify?" he asked. "Taste this," she spat. She brought a spoonful of marigold custard to his lips as he took the sample into his mouth. "Mmm," he hummed. "That's really good. Nutmeg and ginger?" he guessed. "Hawthorn and allspice," she announced. "Really?" he humored. "I might be more impressed or less impressed if I knew what hawthorn was." Betty tossed a tasting spoon into the sink and wiped her hands with her apron. Dracula's medallion wasn't in the novel. It was added to the 1931 film as an aristocratic rank to give him the look of a nobleman," she answered. His brow furrowed, surprised by her answer. Her face lit up and her mouth dropped open. "Ooh," she hooted. Did I just bruise your movie trivia ego? You did. You absolutely did. How did you know that if it wasn't in the book? He asked. His wife took a taste of pumpkin mousse and licked her lips. A different book, she chirped. Dave rolled his eyes. Naturally. He showed her his screen. I've narrowed it down to these two Dracula costumes. One has the pendant and one doesn't, but I really like the Renaissance-era style of the one without. I need a deal breaker. Help me out. Betty tossed the spoon. That depends. Do you want to be inaccurate Dracula from the film, or Renaissance fair Dracula, which is also inaccurate? Vlad the Impaler missed the Renaissance by about 100 years, she said. He looked defeated. Well, when you put it like that, I think I might keep browsing. What are you going as? He asked. Ugh, she roared. Don't stress me out. I'm really getting into the trick-or-treat spread. Don't remind me about the things I'm neglecting. I understand you're on a roll and you're doing a bang-up job of it, but Halloween is in 2 weeks, he cautioned. Your costume is your uniform. Soldiers prep, clean, and maintain their uniforms as representatives of their country. We need to do the same if we're showing respect for the holiday. Betty countered. I have 247 costumes in my closet upstairs. Would it be completely unreasonable to wear one of them again? We live in a new neighborhood. Nobody will notice, she shouted. Her husband dropped his jaw and stared at her in feigned horror. It's like I don't even know you anymore, he gasped. Betty raised her white powdery hands and shook off the anxiety, returning to her work. Dave stood behind her and lovingly placed his hand on her shoulder as she whisked sugar into raw egg and milk. So, how's it going in the bakery? He asked. You're not putting anything weird or dangerous other than curses and toad transformation into these pies, are you? Of course not. I'm not in the business of poisoning our entire neighborhood, she snapped. She placed the bowl on the island and rested her palms. Honestly, it's going really, really good. That's good, he praised. But, she stipulated. Uh-oh, what's the but? He hummed. She took a long breath. The ingredients in the spells are jiving really well with the ingredients in the pastries and cakes. But most of the book requires Grimmberries, and it would be really, really awesome if we could identify what they were and get a hold of some. A lot of some. Like sacks of them, she emphasized. Veronica next door said she had about 500 trick-or-treaters last year. There'll be a lot of mouths to feed. And I want to go all in with what the compendium has to offer in keeping with our theme for handouts this year. Veronica next door? He queried. Yeah, sweet old lady in the gray one-story. Smells like kitty litter and pee. I brought her a pie earlier, Betty said. Our first test victim. Look at you mingling with the neighbors, he taunted kindly. She rolled her eyes dramatically. I'll tell you what, he said. Start practicing as though you have the berries. Use blueberries or something instead. And I'll hunt down your gray berries and see what I can get. Maybe that'll take some stress off of you and you can start thinking about your costume. She turned and faced him with a thankful smile. Grimmberries, she corrected him. Grimmberries, he repeated. I doubt it's something completely unavailable. Or extinct. Betty jumped, slapped her hands together, and kissed him on the chin. A thick cloud of flour engulfed them both. And I'll take care of picking out the wine, he said. There's no better feeling than sitting down and watching our show after the chaos is over and knowing we did our part for the season. He stepped towards the hall. You coming to bed? Betty untied her apron and tossed it onto a hook beside the fridge. Yeah, I'll clean everything up in the morning. The lights were doused as the couple floated down the hall and ascended the stairs to the bedroom. A door was closed, and the entirety of the first floor became drenched in ominous blackness. An unease began to linger. A sickening sense of vile corruption bloomed from the center of the kitchen. Its villainous stain of enormity tainted the walls and claimed the home. On the cluttered island, and shrouded in night, The open codex hummed with an enigmatic life force. As if manipulated by a ghost, the pages of the compendium turned. Page after page flipped at a rapid pace and suddenly stopped on a section of the book defiled by baking flour and canola oil. Amber light cast a haunting glow onto the kitchen ceiling, as an old rune was etched into one lambskin page. The marking burned like searing coals, only to quickly vanish into darkened ash. The light obscured, the hum ceased, and the codex slapped closed. All that remained was a puff of white and the scent of powdered sugar, in the darkness of polyester cobwebs, plastic spiders, and synthetic Halloween charm. Later that night, in the small gray one-story house next door, a single light kindled from the dim living room. Veronica sat in a large recliner beside a tall four-point cane, standing upright beside her elderly hand. The woman was large and draped warmly in a fall-themed muumuu. About a dozen cats crowded her as she watched the television and ate from a family-sized pan of microwaved lasagna. Crying felines pawed at her feet, laid in her lap, and perched on every free space upon the cushy chair. Behind Veronica's seat, and mounted on the wall, a large wooden crucifix hung pretentiously above her screaming pets and bleach-blonde hairdo. Cat-themed scriptures and photos of deceased furry friends decorated the rest of the home's interior. Her program ended as a series of reverse mortgage and Medicare commercials began their parade. The woman sighed, rested her lasagna on a wooden side table, and began shooing the cats off her lap. Two leapt away, but one remained, stubbornly refusing to budge. "Sadie, baby girl down," she whispered softly, snapping her fingers. The solid black Bombay cat ignored her. "Sadie baby, off mommy's lap," she shouted. Nothing. "Sadie," she said, "mommy's gotta feed you. It's time to eat. Who wants to eat?" she sang. The finicky beast turned on its back and raised its paws into the air, begging for affection. Veronica lost her patience, grabbed the cat with both hands, and tossed it violently onto the floor. "Get the hell off me!" she screamed. Shifting her weight slowly to her feet, the woman stood, leaned on the cane, and lethargically made her way to the kitchen pantry. All the way, her fuzzy companions pawed, cried, and followed. She flipped on the kitchen lights and illuminated the disaster of filthy litter pans, open cans, and flies. She noticed the pantry door ajar and shook with fever. "Shit! I left it open again!" she gnashed. About 6 steps and a minute later, she swung the door open and yanked on the chain switch. A buzzing bulb cast a mechanical light onto a toppled bag of feed. The paper sack had been torn to shreds, and only remnants of dry cat food and brown dust was left behind. Veronica turned and faced the living room. Her forehead went red with rage. "God damn it, Sadie, you little bitch!" she hollered. Sadie watched her fit from the seat of the recliner. She licked her jaws below wide, moon-like eyes. The woman left the mess, closed the door, and hobbled to the refrigerator. A bright blue light blinded her as she swung open the door and searched. Depleted cans of cat chow, expired condiments, and Tupperware containers filled with vet-requested urine samples took up most of the fridge's real estate. The only fresh item available was a large round pie provided by her new neighbor. Veronica took the pie by the edge, pulled it from the grate, and closed the door. The pie was perfectly crafted. Crimped edges, a buttered crusty weave, and the face of an orange jack-o'-lantern applied with dollops of cheesecake icing. A feast for the tongue, as well as the eyes. The woman bent at the waist and tossed the pie onto the floor beside a moist litter box. Crumbs flew and custard spilled onto the stained tile. The cats sniffed at the treat, showed no interest in their substitute dinner, and continued to harp. "I'll go shopping in the morning, babies," Veronica said softly. She straightened her back and glared at the cat in her chair. Sadie, you can wait until morning. This isn't for you, fat ass, she barked. The Fellowship of Beggars followed Veronica as she returned to her seat, slapped Sadie off the cushion, and fell into position. She released the cane and shifted into comfortability. The next program was introduced and commenced its broadcast. Sadie watched her brothers and sisters crowd around her angry mother. She licked her paws and then her coat. Catching a whiff of what was offered in the kitchen, she curiously traveled across the carpet and tapped her paws against the tile floor. The pie was bright, attractive, and sweet. Its brown and citrus colors matched the bag she had destroyed in the pantry. Without hesitation, she sniffed at the cheesecake and began to eat. Frosting dotted her whiskers and lips. Veronica's eyes began to close behind her large framed lenses. The television screen reflected in her glasses as she fell asleep and began to snore. Abruptly, Sadie ran into the room and stood before the recliner, pie smeared across her face and crumbs stuck to her fur. Her eyes were larger than usual. Her pupils had retracted to razor-thin slits. She shook, then convulsed. The impact knocked her to her side and made her yelp. Suddenly, she stood upright and began to urinate. The thick stream of pee struck the carpet and continued to flow so loudly Veronica woke. She opened her eyes, adjusted her glasses, and noticed the cat. God damn it, Sadie, use your box, she spat. Sadie looked her directly in the eye as the pee stream became thicker and more powerful. Spray spattered against the floor and pooled into a large puddle beneath the feline's feet. Sadie? Veronica squeaked. The situation reached alarming levels of extremity when Sadie began spasming violently as her limbs flayed and urine fountained in all directions. The cat began to scream as the sound of snapping limbs and tearing tendons overpowered the volume of the TV. Sadie! Veronica cried. Long, black, bone-like protrusions spidered out from the beast's body, snatching each cat one by one from the recliner and pulling their bodies into Sadie's, creating a howling, twisting ball of fur and claws. Veronica trembled as she attempted to stand. She gripped her cane and struggled to peel herself from the chair in the midst of the panic. The ball of cats mutated into one deformed monstrosity, constructed of torn fur, black bones, white teeth, and green eyeballs. The creature was the size of a panther and laid sprawled across the carpet. It looked unconscious, even dead. Veronica gave up on trying to move. The sight sent her heart into convulsions as she stared in stunned dismay. Shockingly, the panther stood. It fixated its hellish gaze on Veronica and leapt forward. The old woman screamed as her cane knocked to the floor, the lasagna slapped the carpet, and the recliner fell backward. The woman howled in pain and anguish. A hot dose of blood splashed a hand-knit sign, mounted on a nearby wall, reading, "Bless this home and all who meow in it." Daylight poured through the Wallaces' front doorway. Hay bales and pumpkins decorated the hall, and a wooden scarecrow smiled just beneath the inset window. With a jar, the boundary was thrown open. Dave entered wearing a long brown coat and a festive scarf. He carried a tall stack of pine trays that rose from his fingers and touched his chin. He swung his leg around and kicked the door closed behind him. In the kitchen, both mixers emitted a low-pitched whir as flour, granulated sugar, and yeast was kneaded into dough. The island was a buffet of meticulously prepped pies, cakes, cupcakes, and foldovers. Their glowing crusts, artistic toppings, and violet colors exhibited a standard of visual presentation worthy of a royal banquet. Betty stood over the sink, washing her hands. Her husband trotted into the kitchen and placed the trays carefully beside a plate of green apple hand pies. The shipment rose 3 feet from the granite island. Dave shouted to Betty over the working mixers and running water. She turned and noticed him. Quickly, she shut off the faucet and switched off the motors. "What?" she asked. She stared at the trays. Dave threw out his hands and proudly presented the stack. Grimmberries, he announced. His wife gawked with a wide, awestruck gape. No way, she hallooed. Where did you find them? She took a tray from the top, placed it before her, and began tearing off the mesh. Remember that farmer's market you mentioned? He asked. Yeah. Betty peeled back foam, exposing hundreds of marble-sized fruits colored enigmatically in vibrant hues of gray, purple, and blue. She took one into her fingers and sniffed it curiously. Well, there's an old-timer there by the name of Percy Caldwell, who runs a pickled venison jerky table. Very delicious, by the way. I bought some. You gotta try it, Dave said. He leaned in and kissed his wife. He sold you the berries? She asked. She popped the berry into her mouth and chewed. Her eyes lit up with delight. No, he clarified. But he knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a woman who runs a market down in Evans Park that grows them in her old barn converted to a greenhouse on her father's property. She sold me the berries, and at a very reasonable rate. I, of course, tipped her for her time, since she took a couple hours out of her schedule to meet me out there. Typically, she only visits the barn twice a week, and today wasn't one of her days. Betty ignored his inclination to hand away money. Her smile upon tasting the berry lit up the kitchen. They taste like butter and taffy. She ate two more. Gods, they're amazing. Grimmberries. Who knew? She gushed. Phytologically, they're called... Dave pulled out his phone and read out loud. Genus Vaccinium calvera, a large group of flowering plants in the heath family. Native to Europe and Asia, this species of antioxidant-rich fruit only grows in temperatures under 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and when dehydrated retains a shape similar to that of a human skull, earning them the colloquialisms mortisberry, necroberry, and death fruit. He flashed her a jovial gaze as he stowed his phone. Which is straight up killer for the Halloween season, wouldn't you say? Betty bounced and cheerfully ate another handful of death berries. She swallowed and excitedly threw her hands out over her buffet of sweets. Okay, I'm going to start baking on Thursday at 5 a.m. That should give me plenty of time before Friday evening. I'm making 25 pies, 28-inch cakes, and about 200 cookies, mini pies, and cupcakes. That'll yield about 600 servings, and I can always toss in a few more trays of single serves while you man the tables, she explained. Flavors are going to vary based on stock. She placed a hand on the stack of Grimmberry trays. Please tell me we can get more of these this week? She asked. I've got 6 more stacks in the car, Dave said. Holy shit. Okay, I think we're good then, she hummed. Did you think about all the variables that might hinder us keeping an entire smorgasbord of baked goods out on the driveway Halloween night? He asked. Betty's smile frowned. She shook her head with irritable confusion. Like what? His eyes widened. Like if it rains, it gets windy, or if the birds get wise? She ground her teeth and stomped her foot. You always have to do this, don't you? I'm in a harmonistic tension-free flow and you have to drop another stress bomb. When has it ever rained us out on Halloween? She bellowed. 2019, 2013, and 1991. 91 was that Halloween blizzard, remember? We had to wear an Arctic survival gear over our costumes, he replied. Betty huffed. Then we go door to door and hand deliver like we did during COVID. People loved that. And if birds show up, our theme can be Alfred Hitchcock. Dave grinned lovingly. He leaned in and kissed her on the lips. You really did think of everything, he cooed. I'm going to unload the rest of the flats. Where do you want them? He headed down the hall for the door. Kitchen table's fine, she shouted. She switched the mixers back on. They continued to moan and churn. And no more stress bombs, she demanded. What are you going to be for Halloween? He half joked. Shut up, she cried. Thursday morning and the day before the big event arrived. Betty woke to her alarm, leapt out of bed, and tied on her apron. The baking commenced as she floured the island, kneaded dough, and boiled Grimmberries down to a thick sugared syrup. Hawthorn, wild garlic, dock leaves, and sea spaghetti was added to egg, salt, butter, and baking powder, as ingredients from the Codex and the Vintage Baker were merged precariously together. Through the rest of the day and throughout the night, Betty slaved and labored. She produced 30 pies, 24 cakes, and over 250 single-serve baked goods. After 6 crates of Granny Smith apples, 12 flats of black raspberries, and every last Grimberry from the kitchen table, the banquet was tediously prepared. Every available surface was covered in sugary sweets and tantalizing desires. Betty scrubbed the pans and wiped down the sink. She removed her bleached apron, tossed it into the washing machine, and dragged her body upstairs and into bed. 11 hours until showtime, and the work was complete. Halloween night. Dave thundered down the oak staircase and sauntered into the living room. His expression conveyed flat outrage as he stood in a bright orange t-shirt that read, "This is my Halloween costume," in a playful ghoulish font. His wife sat on the sofa, wearing a violet flowing witch costume. She ate from a bowl of sugared blackberries and cackled gaily upon seeing his sour frown and unappreciated attire. He spoke sternly. "This shirt is blasphemy, and I mean that to every degree of the word's definition." "It looks good on you," she smirked. "It's contemptuous," he spat. She popped a raspberry into her mouth. "Well, think of it this way," she said. "It's new. You've never worn it before, and it's prepped, cleaned, and ironed. All of your standards met as a representative of Halloween." Dave exhaled sharply through his nose. "Can we just get the festivities underway?" he said impatiently. "I still have to set up the table, get the projector going, and pull out the lawn chairs to start scouting for early bird trick-or-treaters. We don't want to miss anyone." Betty rested the berries on the coffee table and stood. She pulled an oversized witch hat from the cushion beside her and placed it on her blonde head. "If I keep myself busy, I can start forgetting about this stupid shirt," he griped. They headed for the front door. "Now who's stressed?" she taunted him. "I'm not stressed, I'm unnerved," he snipped. "Did you pick out the wine for tonight?" she asked, still poking at his nerves. "Shut up," he snapped. Long plastic tables were dragged out of the garage, unfolded and positioned into place. Mummy print vinyl tablecloths were stretched over them and pinned at each corner. 2 large Adirondack-style chairs were placed at the foot of the driveway, painted festively in orange and black jack-o'-lanterns. A box projector was plugged in and planted on one of the tables, facing the garage. The wide door was closed, as the beast from 20,000 Fathoms was dimly projected onto the garage door like a drive-in theater, in black and white monochrome. The first round of baked goods were brought out, sliced, and divided into servings on ebony paper plates. The weather displayed no signs of obstruction. The air was still, and not a single bird was in sight. 6 p.m. struck as the couple planted their bodies in their chairs and waited for the rush. Dave took a bite of pickled venison jerky as he peered through a pair of safari-grade binoculars. Their home was situated at the very center of a cul-de-sac and faced directly down their street. Any costumed treat seekers would be traveling to the house head-on. "Do you see anyone?" Betty asked. He chewed as he spoke. "No, not yet. Hang on." He leaned forward, examining both corners of the distant crossing avenue. "Never mind. It's just a mailman. Or someone in a mailman costume. Hand me a plate just in case," he requested. Betty reached behind her and took a thin serving of Grimberry pie with buttercream icing from the table. Relaxing, he lowered the binoculars and rested his back against the chair. He took a long, pleasing breath. His eyes wandered delightfully. Betty placed an affectionate hand on his. "Smell that?" he asked. She nodded happily. The decomposition of the leaves, the smell of cooking meat, pumpkin spice, ginger tea, moisture soaking into maple wood, he drifted. "That's Halloween. He nodded jovially. A lot of things come and go over the years. A lot of things change. The outfits, the food, the attitude, the taboos. But the smell? That has always stayed the same. He took another delicious breath. Now all we need is a bonfire. They sat together, smiling from ear to ear, their hearts beating as one, and their spirits as free as death. In the midst of their most treasured time of year, Dave and Betty were home at last. Movement faintly came into view from down the street. Dave lifted his heavy lenses and scoped the situation. A small family with 2 children approached from around the corner. "Okay, look alive," he said. "We've got Unicorn Princess, Robot Zombie, and Vampire Mom and Dad coming in at 12 o'clock. Dave winced as he studied them. "Ah, damn." "What's the matter?" Betty asked. "Dad went for the Renaissance look, and he's wearing the Dracula pendant. And it looks really becoming," he complained. "Oh," she replied. "Damn it. Why didn't I think of that?" he griped. Betty stood and grabbed a pie server. "4 plates?" she asked. "4 plates," he confirmed. Dave stood and took a second plate into his hand. The enthusiastic pair stood on the sidewalk, awaiting the family's arrival, with 4 servings at the ready. They smiled widely and waited patiently as the group stopped at every single house on the way to their cul-de-sac. 10 long minutes passed before the family finally arrived at their driveway. "Happy Halloween," Dave greeted brightly. Betty repeated him. "Happy Halloween." Piercing the moment of welcoming pleasantry, a Rottweiler began howling and snapping upon spotting the Wallaces. It was restrained by the father with a silver chain and a choker collar. The dog viciously barked and lunged as Dave stumbled backward in terror, almost dropping his plates. Betty's eyes went wide with fear. "Oh, don't worry. He's a big softy. He's just saying hi," the mother said. She was about 8 months pregnant and kept a single hand on her wide, distended belly. She snapped her fingers at the animal. "Igor, no, stop," she shouted. The dog silenced, but its contempt remained. It sat and growled behind nipping teeth, refusing to take its eyes off Dave. "Of course," Dave chimed. He failed to come up with an offhanded compliment regarding the dog's name. At any other given moment, he had all the confidence in the world. However, in the presence of clapping jaws and matted fur, he was reduced to formidable apprehension. The 2 children hurriedly approached the offering of baked crust and sugar. A small girl in a pink unicorn hoodie wore a ballroom-style dress and held a glittering scepter. Her big-boned older brother wore a box sprayed in silver paint and undead makeup smeared on his face. The boy was the first to speak. "Pie, fucking A, I'm first," he howled. "Joseph, language," his mother spat. Dave handed a plate to each child. A plastic fork stood embedded and upright from each slice. "There you are, the feast is served. 1 for each of you," he said pleasantly. "Thank you," the girl chirped politely. Joseph dropped his candy bag and tossed the fork on the pavement. He began eating the slice with his bare hand. "I want 2, he barked. "2? We've got 2, no problem," Dave replied. He snatched another plate from the table and handed it over. "We've also got 3, 4, 5, and 6 if the mood strikes you right." His mother interjected. No, Joseph, 2 is enough. You just ate that whole tray of Rice Krispie treats. You'll throw up again," she warned. Betty handed servings to the adults as they thanked her graciously. Dave bent over and addressed the girl. "How about you? You want 2 slices of pie as well?" he asked. The little angel spoke sweetly in an even, courteous tone. "No, thank you," she squeaked. "I'm going to save mine for later when I watch Maisie Sprinkle." "That's her TV show. She saves everything for watching Maisie before bed," her mother said. Her husband melted with desire as he ate the pie. "Maisie Sprinkle, huh?" Dave repeated. "Well, I'll tell you what." He grabbed a pumpkin foldover from the buffet and placed it on her plate beside the slice. "Just in case you want some dessert to go with your dessert when you're watching Maisie, you'll have that. Sound good?" The girl showed her oversized teeth and nodded favorably. "Say thank you, Claire," her mom requested. "I did," the angel cried. Mom gestured to their overzealous lawn. "I love what you did with the house. We could see it all the way from down the street. We almost didn't come down this way," she praised. Dave grinned. He glanced back at his decorations. "That was the plan. If you're going to go at all, you may as well go big. You should see the backyard," he joked. The woman laughed. She took her first bite of pie and shivered with delectation. Her eyes went wide with revelation. "Oh my God! What is in this? It's amazing!" she moaned. Betty's expression emitted rainbows as her husband answered. "Oh, that's all my wife. I can take credit for the lawn, but I'm completely useless in the kitchen. She makes everything from scratch." She took another large bite and addressed Betty. "Remind me to come back and get your recipe. This is fabulous." "Absolutely," Betty graced. The woman shook her head as she chewed. "I'm so sorry. Where are my manners?" She extended her hand. "Henny Kensings. This is my husband, Robert. We live down on Sycamore Ranch." Dave and Betty shook Henny's hand, keeping a good distance from Robert and his chained beast. "Henny, Robert, pleased to meet you. We're David and Betty Wallace, new blood in the neighborhood. Moved in last June," Dave greeted. He pointed to the woman's pregnant tummy. "And should we expect to see a fifth Kensing's trick-or-treater next year?" He grinned. "Oh, I hope so. With the way this pregnancy is going, it almost feels like it'll never end," she laughed. "Do you know what you're having?" Betty asked. Her voice was quiet and shy. "Not this time," she replied. "We wanted to know ahead of time with the first two, but we want this one to be a surprise." "They always are," Dave remarked. Henny shook her head and motioned pettishly to her son. "Ain't that the truth?" From down the street, a decent flow of trick-or-treaters made their path from house to house, approaching the cul-de-sac. Dave noticed. "Here we go. Here come the crowds. Halloween's officially begun," he said happily. Henny turned and waved genially at the people approaching. She whirled back around. "Say, are you guys going to the Dark Hollow Fair downtown? Bradbury does it every year. There's games and food and prizes." Dave and Betty looked at one another and shrugged, unaware that the event even existed. "It starts at 8, an hour after trick-or-treating starts," Henny said. "Everyone in town goes after collecting candy. It's a hoot." She pointed a thumb at her husband. "I'm going to try and get Robert to enter one of the contests with me. He never participates in anything," she whispered. "Do you think you'll be there?" The Wallaces hesitated awkwardly, attempting to hide their complete disinterest in the fair. "Sounds spooktacular, Henny, but if we did go," Dave started. He gestured to the tables. "There'd be nobody to man the inventory, and we want to make sure we get everybody," he chuckled. "Also, the missus and I have a ritual we do every Halloween when the night is out. It's kind of our midnight mass to All Hallows Eve." "Aw," Henny moaned. "Well, think about it for next year. It's a riot." "Sure thing," Dave chirped. The crowds neared the Wallace driveway. Henny and her family began to move along. "Anyway, it's been great meeting you both," Henny said. "Welcome to the neighborhood." "Likewise," Dave bid. The Kensings continued their route along the cul-de-sac loop and approached the next house on their path. The sun set as hundreds of costume participants traveled the subdivision and solicited candy from every home, taking part in the tradition of sugar distribution. Children, teens, and adults crowded the streets, knocked on doors, and rang doorbells. The entire town was alive with Halloween spirit and ghoulish excitement. Dave and Betty handed out plate after plate of pie, cake, and singles, as each family happily and with delightful surprise accepted their corrupted confections. Some partakers found the offerings so profound, they circled back again and even twice to take another helping. Dark consumed the evening, as the festivities went on and became even more lively. Lawn decorations blazed, flashlights flashed, and glowing accessories accompanied costume attire in the midst of the celebratory night. Dark Hollow Fair was a buzz of excitement and Halloween fun. The entire celebration took place in Town Square, a large open space situated in the downtown district of Bradbury Ash. Each family found their way to the event after collecting as much candy as they could carry, joining the already overcrowded grounds. Illuminated rides, carnival games, a beauty contest, 2 haunted houses, and endless food trucks added to the excitement of the yearly reception. High-energy pop songs from the last 2 decades echoed against the surrounding downtown structures, as the smell of popcorn and funnel cakes delectably wafted in the gentle breeze. The Kensings family happily traveled through the thick crowds and booming music. Claire continued to carefully preserve her pie plate as her father kept Igor on a tight tether. "I want to go home and eat my candy," Joseph shrieked. "You've already eaten enough candy, Joseph. You'll get sick," his mother replied. "Give me your bag." She supported her belly with one hand and snatched the treat-filled sack from her son's hand. "What's the goddamn deal?" he screamed. "Give it back." "You can have it back tomorrow," she scowled. Claire pointed across the grounds to a small petting zoo. "Mom, can I go see the ponies?" she asked. Her mother spotted a large booth with a long table. A row of 10 seats were placed before 10 oversized tin buckets. The banner above read, "Battle of the Bobbers." A large screen displayed a digital timer counting down from 3 minutes until the next battle. Henny seized her husband by the wrist. "Bobbing for apples, Robert, look!" she cried. Robert eyed the booth with objection. His lips frowned into a sour grimace. Henny became agitated. She slapped him on the meat of his upper arm. "I told you we were doing a contest this year, and this is the one I'm picking." She turned to her children. "Joseph, take your sister to see the ponies. Your father and I are doing the apple contest," she commanded. "Ponies are assholes," he screamed. "I want fudge." "Fine," she compromised. "We'll get fudge after the ponies and apples." The boy crossed his arms stubbornly. "Not good enough," he complained. Henny sighed and handed over the candy bag. Her son eagerly took it. "Take your sister and Igor. We'll be done in a few minutes." Joseph took the dog by his chain and ran with his sister through the costumed hordes, headed for the petting zoo. "And watch your language," she cried out. Henny and Robert approached the booth, signed up, and took their seats. Over the next several minutes, the remaining 8 chairs filled with participants, and the timer dropped to 0. Henny clapped her hands and heartily nudged her husband. His sour expression had not changed. He glowered at the empty bucket before him. A tall, overenthused host in a ringmaster-style coat and hat grabbed a microphone and leapt onto the grass. A glow-in-the-dark skull was painted over his face and brightened under the cast of blacklight bulbs. A small group of onlookers gathered around the booth. "Welcome to the 53rd Bradbury Ash Dark Hollow Fair and the 2nd Battle of the Bobbers tournament of the evening," he announced. Windswept concert speakers emitted his voice across the entirety of Town Square and over the music. "Our boo-hungry bobbers will have no more than 2 minutes to empty their troughs with hands behind their backs using nothing but werewolf fangs and howling determination." A handful of volunteers sporting Dark Hollow t-shirts emptied gallons of distilled water into the buckets. A second round of locals added 1 box of Honeycrisp apples to each trough, counting them to be sure the prospects were even. "Show me 2 minutes on the clock," the host shouted. The screen obliged, displaying the time. He pointed a finger at the avid row of contestants. "Are we ready?" Henny, Robert, and their contenders nodded eagerly. The announcer held up his fingers as he counted down. 3, 2, 1, and begin, he screamed. The crowd cheered as the bobbers crossed the starting line. Hands behind her back, Henny stood and furiously slapped her face into the cold water, submerging her entire head and soaking her shoulders. She took an apple almost instantly into her teeth and let it fall onto the table. It bounced, rolled, and fell onto the stage. Uninhibited by her swollen gut and unborn child, she did the same with 2 more, letting them drop and scatter. All that mattered was emptying the bucket. Robert found it difficult to snatch even one apple from his tin. He made several attempts as frustration reddened his forehead. His wife noticed his struggle and leaned in close. Her hair splashed water onto his angry face. "You have to hold the apple against the bottom and bite into it," she shouted over the chaos. He followed her instructions and began plucking apples of his own, releasing them from his teeth and letting them bounce. A minute passed as every contestant splashed, bit, and spat in the heat of the countdown. After Henny's 8th apple, she began to feel a short wave of nausea. Dizziness struck her as she took a break and sat in her chair. Robert went wild with enthusiasm as he emptied his bucket and caught up with the others. He pulled his 10th Honeycrisp apple from the water and tossed it aside. Oddly, dark circles began to form above his cheeks, and his eyes were beginning to cloud. A deathly gray replaced chestnut brown, as the entire surface of his eyeballs rotted into an unusual form of pallor mortis. He dunked his head into the bucket, seized another apple, and spat it onto the table. His eyes were now bright white. Black scales were beginning to form, spreading from his eye sockets and webbing across his face. "Rob, I don't feel so good," Henny moaned. The night began to spin as she supported herself against the table, trying not to fall. Robert soaked his face again. An apple slipped from his jaws and floated to the top. Before he could lift his head to make another attempt, something fleshy grazed his nose. He sank his teeth in and pulled. Robert's dripping face erupted from the bucket. His eyes now emitted a bright yellow sheen, and the scales had spread all the way to his chin. In his mutating teeth, he held a dangling human ear. Blood oozed from the appendage and dripped onto his remaining bobbing apples. Down the table and 5 seats from Robert, a competitor pulled his head from his tin and began shrieking wildly and painfully. Blood spewed from the back of his jaw and the top of his neck. His ear had been bitten and torn cleanly from his head. Robert spat the ear onto the table and continued to bob. His face continued to transform as he pulled a nose, a fleshy cheek, and a human eye from the thick red water of his bucket and added them to his collection of body parts. 3 more contestants began to wail, covering their faces and spraying blood onto the stage. The volunteers panicked, the host began to tremble, and the crowd screamed in terror at the gore-drenched display. Unaware of the grotesque turn of events, Henny collapsed and fell onto the stage. A growing pain blossomed from her belly and made her quake with sickness and churning discomfort. She lifted the edge of her costume and beheld her stomach. Her protruding gut had turned a dark, bruising purple and shivered with movement. "Rob," she cried, "I think the baby's coming." Her husband was distracted. He had gathered all the fleshy appendages he collected from his bucket and began eating them with a primal vigor. Bloody participants ran from the booth. Screams and disorder echoed from the crowd, and the host had already abandoned the contest. Henny screamed in pain as her belly split. Ruby red fluid exploded from her gut as twisting tree branches spiraled from her body and reached towards the sky. The branches thickened and became the rough, blood-soaked trunk of an apple tree as the woman went limp and pale with death. The tree slowed its growth and curled into shape. On one protruding branch, an apple began to form. The oversized fruit ripened and matured in seconds, hanging heavily from the limb. The scratching cries of an infant cut through the havoc as the face of a baby howled from the surface of the apple. The apple screeched and shook as tears fell from its tightly closed eyes. Rob finished his meal of human flesh and ears. He jumped from his seat, approached the screaming fruit, and plucked it from the branch. Crazed starvation showed violently in his lizard-like eyes as he sank his teeth in and devoured the apple. The baby's cries intensified to yowling fits of agony. Claire and her brother stood on the wooden fence surrounding the petting zoo. They hugged the top rung of the barrier against their chests as they watched the livestock graze. Igor licked his chops as a rooster passed the interlacing wire mesh, taunting his instincts. "Ponies are stupid," Joseph spat. He crammed a popcorn ball against his lips and took a messy bite, his bag gripped tightly in his fist. They're not stupid. They're magical, his sister argued sweetly. Holding her pie plate close, she turned her head and noticed intense shouts coming from the center of the fairgrounds. People are screaming, she said with unease. Of course they're screaming, dummy. It's Halloween, he cracked. Claire noticed other children paying for cups of dried corn to feed the animals. Goats, sheep, and llamas gladly licked it from their unsanitary hands. Can we feed them too? The girl asked. Mom didn't give me any money, and I'm not giving them any of my candy. They can starve, he yelled. She gave her brother a look of adolescent criticism. They're not going to starve. Everybody's feeding them, she peeped. Then you don't need to, Joseph snapped. A vile grin crept across his face as he eyed his sister's plate. I have an idea. What? She asked curiously. Let's see if they like pie. He grabbed Claire's plate and tossed it into the pen. The paper dish landed upside down onto grime and scattered hay. His sister spewed with outrage. I was saving that for Maisie, you jerk. Maisie's an asshole, he objected. He turned his eyes to the pen. Let's see if they eat it. Claire frowned as a llama neared the plate and sniffed. Disinterested, the animal trotted away and approached a group of corn-offering kids. A few chickens passed the plate, and a pony galloped by, stepping onto the paper and flattening the desserts into mush. I don't think they want it, Claire pouted. You ruined my Halloween for nothing. From the rear corner of the miniature zoo, a black goat slowly made its way to the defiled desserts. It lowered its head and took the paper into its teeth. The goat began to chew as the slice of pie smeared down the plate and fell onto the ground, beside the pumpkin fold-over. Consuming the frosting-covered trash, the goat swallowed and bleated loudly. It stared at Joseph and Claire with an impartial, lifeless gaze. Eat the pie, the boy shrieked. The goat bleated again, then again. Stupid idiot, Joseph moaned. Suddenly, the animal went still as a statue. Its eyes fixated on the brother and sister, as a strange breeze blew through the petting zoo. Its coat hardened, and its hue faded, from a healthy black sheen to a tablet gray. The creature's entire body turned to limestone, as cracks began to form, and a green moss began to grow, like the northern-facing edge of a rock formation. After momentary seconds of shock and surprise, the goat exploded into chunks, sending rocky debris in every direction. The other animals in the pen panicked, going into discombobulated fits and darting from left to right, trapped by their enclosure. Where the creature stood just seconds ago, and in a cloud of airborne dust, a black specter in the image of a goat hovered above the ground. The menacing ghost snarled below roasting crimson eyes. Its clawing horns rose high above gnashing teeth and dangling hooves. Joseph was the first to react. Oh, fuck, demon goat, he wailed. Igor yanked his chain out of the boy's hand and darted across the fair. Joseph and his sister dropped from the fence and sprinted into the crowds. Others joined them. Frightened fairgoers and terrified families fled from the event and dispersed into the adjoining streets. Other anomalies had taken place throughout the celebration simultaneously, mutilating victims and claiming lives. The Tiny Tots haunted house was eating every child that approached. The winner of the Dark Hollow Beauty Contest had become an enormous flesh-hungry squid, and the food trucks exploded into flames, sending wave after wave of devouring fire over the devastated and affrighted grounds. Claire ran beside her brother as a fever struck him. He fell to his knees and dropped his bag onto the sidewalk, moaning grievously. Crowds of people ran by them, crying and squealing, shouting and weeping. The fire spread quickly as the heat engulfed town square. Get up, Claire squeaked. We have to go. Her brother's face had turned a pale green as he pawed at his tummy. I can't. I have to. Before he could finish, he lurched forward and vomited onto the pavement. Wrapped candy and freshly packaged treats struck the street and scattered. He heaved again. Lollipops, single-sized packs of Halloween gummies, and soft circus peanuts spewed from his jaws and piled onto the ground. Claire stepped backward in terror, watching Joseph spray pound after pound of trick-or-treat-ready candy into an enormous heap between his quivering hands. With every wave of vomit, Joseph thinned. His belly disappeared, his baby fat dissolved, and his bones began to show under tightening flesh. With one final choke, Joseph coughed up an entire tray of Rice Krispie treats. The metal pan clanked against the sidewalk as Joseph collapsed onto the pile and expired, a gangly mass of flesh and bone. Claire dropped her candy bag and screamed in fear. Her piercing cry was muted by the deafening disorder and fleeing swarms. Dark Hollow Fair became a blaze of fire and brimstone, as if hell itself had swallowed it whole. Charred, deformed bodies, frosting-covered forks, and burning paper plates were left scattered across the desolated fairgrounds. Dave and Betty laughed maniacally at the top of their lungs. They stood before a man dressed as a clown, accompanied by at least 8 children in eager mouths. He had just finished showing the Wallaces the fake naked butt hanging from the rear of his costume. "At least you won't have to worry about how to use the bathroom when you're out and about, that's for sure," Dave chuckled. "Very funny," Betty remarked. They handed out the final plates of the evening and fell into their patio chairs. The clown and his kids continued their trick-or-treat venture around the cul-de-sac and down the street. The driveway tables held nothing but old dirty plates, soiled pans, and discarded elastic film. "Wow," Dave exclaimed. 645 treats to 590 treaters. That is definitely a new record for us. Betty released a long, exhausted sigh. She glanced at her bare arm. "I think I'm developing a tan from overusing the oven," she said. She rested her head against the wood and took her husband's hand. "Did we do good?" she asked. Dave smiled and squeezed her small palm. "I think we did," he said confidently. "We did really good." They relaxed as the stress of Halloween night oozed from their aching bodies, and fatigue set in. "Can't we just skip the rest of tonight and go straight to bed?" she whined. "You know we can't," he replied. "The night's just getting started." He sniffed the air. A grin stretched his lips. "You smell that?" he asked. Betty took a pleasant breath and closed her eyes with euphoria. "Bonfire," he said happily. "Now it's official. It's Halloween." Down the street, and from around a corner, a family jogged past their cul-de-sac, screaming and shouting. Dave lifted his binoculars and peered at them as they passed. "Tell me that's not more trick-or-treaters. I'm spent," Betty groaned. "No. Wherever they're going, they're not coming down here. Although they are hard to make out." He held the lenses in front of his face and examined them. "Remind me to get those night vision binoculars for next year. These things are useless when the sun goes down," he said. "Ready to pack up?" he asked. "No," she griped, "but here I go." They stood, stretched their backs, and opened the garage. In the same manner everything was brought out. The tables, chairs, projector, and supplies were dragged inside. In minutes, Dave and Betty stacked the pans, folded the tables, and cleared the driveway. The garage door was closed, and the decorative lights were left on. The first phase of Halloween night had come to a satisfying and triumphant close. The kitchen was a clutter of baking debris and dishes as they collapsed onto the sofa. Dave in his contemptuous t-shirt, and Betty in her slightly used witch outfit. She held the codex against her chest and a long dandelion in her fingers as Dave took the remote and illuminated the TV. He checked the large Victorian clock on the wall and then the time on his phone. 6 minutes until showtime, he said. Betty ate from a bowl of sugared Grimmberries as her husband flipped through the channels. He halted at a station broadcasting a solid black screen. A small digital bat flapped its wings above a message stating, "Stream will begin shortly." Dave threw his tired feet onto the coffee table and tossed the remote aside. "So," he began. He gazed merrily into distant nothingness. How many people do you think we killed tonight? He asked. He grinned as Betty ran generalized figures through her head. At least 800, she replied. I know we only served about 600, but I put some nasty, nasty recipes into those pies. We definitely topped last year's numbers. Fantastic, he clamored. Those Grimmberries really did the trick. His voice hardened. Remember when we handed out those hexed dolls one year? That was a disaster. Kids want candy for Halloween, not toys. Win some, lose some, I guess. Betty opened the compendium and thumbed through the pages. Some of the spells were astoundingly gruesome. Even to me, she commented. Well, you are the one who wrote them, he said. I'm surprised you couldn't remember a single one all these years. She writhed with aggravation. The last time I put hands on this book was Samhain of 1073. Since then, we've had 400 plagues and over 3,000 wars. Not to mention the one that was taking place when it was taken from me. And you know stress makes me forget. I'd say 1,000 years brings a lot of stressful events and plenty of forgetfulness, she barked. And my Gaelic needs some serious practice. Fair enough, he eased. At least the book is back where it belongs with the others. Betty simpered and sniffed the dandelion. It is, isn't it? She cooed. She ran her hand across a page in the codex, stuck the flower into the book as a marker, and closed the cover, flattening the dandelion between the pages. She stood and placed it on a bookshelf between volumes 5 and 7. The entire Bible of the Compendium of the Abermatian Mage was reunited at last, after centuries of curses, famines, museums, and auction houses. The deadly books warmed with an amber glow as the last volume was shelved and slid into place. Each codex was bookmarked with the long stem of a flower. Betty sauntered over to the sofa and sat. You think there's enough spells in that book to use again next year? Dave asked. Oh, yeah, she said. I barely cracked the cover. His grin straightened. We'll have to be careful, he cautioned. If we keep doing numbers like this, we'll have to move again before the neighbors get wise. I want to limit us to one move every 4 years. Anything more frequent than that is exhausting and stressful for you. You don't want to do the same thing next year as we did tonight? After how this Halloween turned out, I don't mind the moves, she asked. Dave's smile brought a rosy glow to his cheeks. All right, he admitted. Tonight was pretty spectacular. We can do it again. Is there anything you'd change? She asked. There is, he said. The decorations were perfect. The spread was perfect. Only one thing has been bugging me all night that we'll never do again, and I'm sure you can guess what it is. What's that? She inquired curiously. He pointed his finger directly at Betty's witch gown and hat. Neither one of us wore costumes this year, he stated grudgingly. His wife laughed as they leaned in and kissed. Dave reached to the floor beside the couch and retrieved a tall bottle. He held it with both hands, displaying it to the witch. She covered her mouth with her hands in surprise. Oh my gods, I completely forgot, she laughed. Well, I did not, he hummed. Feast your eyes on pumpkin ginger Granny Smith Merlot, made right here locally in our great state. A happy ghost holding a pumpkin shined from the label. Where did you get this? She gasped. Percy Caldwell, at the farmer's market. The guy who sold me the venison jerky. He makes wine, too. I thought I'd surprise you, he said sweetly. She slipped off the couch and retrieved 2 wine glasses and a bottle opener from the kitchen. Dave popped the top and poured the bouquet of pumpkin ginger and fermented grapes. They tapped their glasses together and sipped. Abruptly, the black screen of the TV faded as midnight struck. The broadcast displayed the dark blue caverns of the Abermati and the 10th level of the Nether, a desolate, inhospitable realm where only the most neglected of the deceased go to feed. Cruelly, The Abermati was also where souls ended up when afflicted by death caused by supernatural evils. Evils that, when left unchecked, roam between worlds and claim lives as they please. A large stone rolled away from the black entrance to the cavern. The camera views switched between 4 different perspectives and showed the cave from agreeable angles. Here we go, Dave spat excitedly. Tell me if you recognize anyone. I always try to pick them out. Shouldn't be too hard with the resolution we have now, Betty said. This screen is an 8K. Remember when we had to actually be there to watch this? Huh, don't remind me, Dave growled. Thousands of naked bodies were herded through the gateway and onto the darkened rocky plain. They cried, wept, and screamed as the stone rolled closed, sealing them inside. Dave leaned forward and examined the frightened souls, beaming giddily as the stream changed angles. From the shadows surrounding the crowd, enormous starving bodies crawled into view and approached the mass. Thousands of ravenous giants crept from the darkness and began devouring the confused flock of newcomers, one after the other. Flesh tore and blood spilled as the feast took hold and the crowd was consumed. Dave was unable to recognize anyone he had handed a plate to over the course of the night. Poor bastards, he noted. But that's what happens when you don't leave a dinner plate for great-great-grandma. None of them do anymore, Betty commented. Not after the Dark Ages. The world is ruled by ignorance. Dave sat back and took a sip from his glass. He smacked his lips and exhaled with satisfaction. And there's no finer wine than watching the ignorant cry by the feast of their own famine, he cited. Oh, I almost forgot to check our rank. He grabbed his phone, opened his social media, and pulled up his page. His handle read, Halloweeners United, beside a glowing full moon avatar. He reviewed posts pouring in, submitted by other entities. Looks like Cleveland did 500, Washington did 600, and Salem did 320? He clicked his tongue with a scold. Shame on you, Salem. You've got a reputation to uphold. Anything close to what we did? Betty asked. He continued to scroll. Not that I'm seeing. So far we hold the torch. Polls aren't completely closed just yet, he said. Suddenly, his phone chimed with the sound of a haunted mansion doorbell. Okay, never mind, polls are closed, he squawked. A post popped up, ranking every participating group by amount of spirits harvested. Dave rose to his feet and victoriously raised his fist into the air. Number 3, Jenny and Patty O'Malley, 764. Number 2, Stephen Olivia Gutenberg, 776. He stuffed his phone into his pocket and opened his arms. His wife rose and excitedly took him by the hands. He kissed her on her left cheek. Number 1. He kissed her on her right cheek. David and Betty Wallace, 820 lives collected and served up to their ancestors. He kissed Betty on the lips as she jumped on her toes with glee. They hugged and celebrated with waltz and wine. After a quick slow dance and a few sips, they returned to the couch, beaming with pride. Betty smiled at Dave as if harboring a dark secret. She chuckled with anticipation. Her husband noticed her delighted hesitation. What? He asked. What's that grin all about? He laughed. Betty slowly raised a finger. 821, she whispered. 821 what? He asked with perplexity. His wife gleamed with a devilish smirk and tapped her nails against her teeth. Dave caught on almost immediately. Oh! He shook his head with a satisfied sneer and blushed with Halloween bliss. You little witch, he cursed. Sunlight poured into buy and sell books, as swirls of dust danced before the tall windows. A bell chimed as Agatha entered. She locked the door behind her and approached the rear counter. She noticed a plate resting beside a stack of home and garden issues, with no one in sight and silence looming through the aisles. She stepped closer to the counter and rested her purse. The plate presented a large slice of berry pie and a note written on an index card. The words, "Have a blessed day," were written in Old English calligraphic handwriting. She checked her surroundings, claimed the pie, and took a bite. She melted with delectation as a gold cross dangled from her wrist. She turned to the open backroom door with a full mouth and shouted, "Oh, Patrick, you really shouldn't have." This was a reading of Grimmberries for Samhain, The Feast of Halloween. Written and narrated by Mark Stephen Nordlund. Copyright 2025, Mark Stephen Nordlund. All rights reserved. A Boohouse Books book. BoohouseBooks.com.